Welcome to a quick video that's going to go over 8 errors that students and professionals alike make in grammar. This is important because when you're writing for electronic media, you want to make the best impression. And in our society, the best impression includes writing in good, complete sentences. So that brings us to our first error, the sentence fragment, or the incomplete sentence. A lot of these are really easy to pick out, but others aren't because we tend to talk in sentence fragments. Take this example. Nothing like a hot shower when you're cold. Can you hear someone saying this? Yeah, you probably can, but it's a sentence fragment. It's a phrase. It needs a subject and a verb to be complete. Easiest correction here is to add a there is. Another example, sometimes your sentence fragment occurs next to another complete sentence. I was hooked on the game is complete. I, subject, was hooked, verb. But, and played constantly is a fragment. When you have this sort of situation, the easiest fix is to piggyback your fragment on a complete sentence before or after it. For example, I was hooked on the game and played constantly. So sentence fragments often stand out, but what about our next error? Run-on sentences. You may have seen these comments on a paper before, but maybe you don't know exactly what these phrases mean. A fuse sentence is 2 sentences just stuck together, like a run-on. We went to the zoo, we had fun. Now most people can tell, you know what, I need some punctuation there, I need a pause there, I need something there. One way to fix a fuse sentence is simply to make 2 separate sentences. We went to the zoo, period. We had fun. Maybe it sounds a little elementary, but it is grammatically correct. But if you're worried about, I don't want a bunch of simple short sentences in my paper, get yourself a coordinating conjunction. These are your fanboys words: for and nor, but, or, yet, and so. And each one gives a slightly different flavor to your sentence. We went to the zoo, but we had fun. We went to the zoo, so we had fun. We went to the zoo and we had fun. Lots of choices to correct an error, and that's honestly the case with most grammatical issues in sentences. You have a lot of options. Another type of run-on sentence is the comma splice. You've realized that you need something in between your sentences, so you stick in a comma. Problem is, a comma's kind of weak. It's a pause, it's a breath. It's not strong enough to hold together 2 complete sentences. What you need instead is a semicolon. This is effective sentence glue. It will stick together 2 complete sentences. You can also, as a correction to either a fused or a comma splice sentence, make a subordinate clause. This is where you take one of the complete sentences that's in your run-on and make it subordinate or secondary to the other part. Here we have, because we went to the zoo, we had fun. I've changed we went to the zoo, a complete sentence, into a sentence fragment or a clause, because we went to the zoo. This is the sort of thing you want to have students do as you get to the upper elementary levels because increasingly complex sentence structure is something that the state looks for on Texas's standardized exams. Parallel structure means that your sentence needs to have all of the same parts of speech. Okay, what does that mean? Let's look at an incorrect example. I prefer running and to swim. The problem here is in my verb form. Running is an ing verb, to swim is a to verb or the infinitive form. It's not parallel. Both of my forms aren't the same. So can you guess how we're going to fix this? We have 2 options. I either go with 2 ing verbs, running and swimming, or I go with 2 to verbs. I prefer to run and to swim. Another example, sometimes your parallel structure is a little harder to detect because you're dealing with nouns and adjectives instead. We want someone honest and with integrity. This is actually not parallel. Let me show you a correction, and it might make more sense. We want someone with honesty and with integrity. Now everything's in the same form. You could even simply say we want someone with honesty and integrity. So you want to watch out for this when usually at the end of your sentence you have a list of things, whether it's verbs, whether it's character traits. Make sure they're all in the same form. Dangling modifiers are a much more difficult error to detect because we've been trained to take ourselves out of sentences. We've been trained not to say I or me, so we end up with dangling modifiers. Here's an example. While driving to campus, a tree fell on my car. Now, probably some of you are looking at this going, okay, what's wrong here? I understand exactly what's going on. The problem is, when in a sentence like this, what comes before the comma, while driving to campus, modifies what comes directly after the comma, a tree. Did a tree drive to campus? I highly doubt it. What happened here is that an agent, an actor, probably me, got taken out of the first part of the sentence, and I created a dangling modifier. So I need to put myself back in here. While I was driving to campus, a tree fell on my car. Let's look at another example. When taking a grammar quiz, concentration is key. This is the sort of sentence you might see in a study skills guide. But again, what comes after the comma? Concentration. Is it doing what's before the comma? Taking a grammar quiz? Probably not. And here's another reason that people make dangling modifiers. Sometimes the corrections go to that very formal and stuffy sounding one. When taking a grammar quiz, one finds that concentration is key. It may sound snooty, but it's grammatically correct. Another area you have to worry about is subject-verb agreement. Sometimes this is pretty easy to detect. When it becomes a problem is when your subject and your verb are split up in your sentence, usually by a prepositional phrase that throws you off. For example, each of the students have to stay after class for a tutorial. Some of you might be looking at this going, okay, what's the problem? I see students have to stay. It agrees. The problem is students is not the word that's the subject of our sentence. Our subject is each, which is singular, means each one. Each one have to stay after class. Now you might be going, that sounds a little bit weird. That's because the correct way to write this sentence is each of the students has to stay after class for a tutorial. When you're picking a verb to agree with your subject, you have to ignore this prepositional phrase. So let's look at another example. The assignments in the blue folder is yours. This one, for some reason, you're probably sensing that there's something wrong. But it says folder is yours. That sounds great. But remember, we ignore the prepositional phrase, which is in the blue folder. The assignments is yours. No, that's not what we want. The assignments in the blue folder are yours. So be really careful with prepositional phrases and also what's called indefinite pronouns. They tend to be singular. Each, somebody, anyone. This also becomes a problem with our next grammatical error. Pronoun agreement. Let's look at this example. Anyone can turn in their paper early. You've probably heard a professor say this. You're probably looking at this going, once again, I don't know exactly what's wrong here. You'll see a sentence like this in advertisements on billboards. But if we're being technical about the grammar, and we are for this presentation, anyone is singular. It's one person. There is plural. It's lots of people. Our pronoun does not agree. And here's why people tend not to make this correction. Anyone can turn in his or her paper early. Used to be people would just say his paper, his book. It was always his. But now we like to include, the other half of the population in the equation. So to be politically correct, we say his or her. And this is hard to remember when you're talking. So honestly, the best way to get around problems of pronoun agreement is to make sure you don't have a pronoun in the end of your sentence. Anyone can turn in the paper early. Who has his or her backpack? No. Who has a backpack? Who needs their pencil? Who needs a pencil? Just get rid of the pronoun and put in the or a instead. Number 7 also has to do with pronouns. Vague pronoun reference. This is when you don't know exactly who's being talked about or referred to. For example, when John and his father came to campus, he really liked the school. Who's he? Is it John or is it his father? The pronoun is vague. It could refer to either one of these fine gentlemen. So to be correct and to be clear, I should specify who he is. When John and his father came to campus, John really liked the school. Ah, okay, now I understand. Vague pronoun reference is mainly about clarity and your reader understanding what's going on. Our final error is a lot like an earlier one, parallel structure, where you need to be consistent in all parts of your sentence. Let's look at an example. I used to be a nursing major, but you have too many requirements to get done. I can hear a student saying this. The problem is the sentence starts with I, first person, and then switches to you, second person. I need to be consistent and parallel throughout my entire sentence. I used to be a nursing major, but I had too many requirements to get done. Or I could rewrite this sort of with pronoun agreement issues in mind. Get rid of the need for a person in the second part. I used to be a nursing major, but there are too many requirements to get done. If I'm worried about my person shifting, I can get rid of a person in the second part of my sentence. If one needs to substitute a class, you should pick the easiest teacher. I've gone from a third person, the nice formal one, and then I've switched to the informal second person you. So to be consistent, I either need to have one, or you and you. If you need to substitute a class, you should pick the easiest teacher. Again, it's about being consistent in your sentences.